between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
Following his address, Mr. Bush attended a national security meeting. CNN senior White House correspondent John King is perched on a building near the White House this evening. John, what happened at that meeting and what's happened since?
Quite an extraordinary meeting, Gene. The president not only meeting with his national security, military, and defense team, but also bringing into that meeting the Transportation Secretary, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Federal Emergency Management Director. All that because so much of this now proceeding on parallel tracks. On the one hand, the federal government taking extraordinary steps to make medical personnel, portable morgues, and others available both in New York and at that scene over at the Pentagon. The investigation is also underway. We are told at that meeting by senior sources that it was discussed that the administration is building evidence that it believes points to people and groups associated with Osama bin Laden. The administration declining to say so publicly, but we are told by sources that was discussed at that meeting with the president and also has been discussed in private briefings senior administration officials have given members of Congress. Now, priority one for the president is to send reassuring signals to the American people that their government is at work during this investigation and during the recovery operations underway in New York and at the Pentagon. And to that end, we are told the president will bring the bipartisan leadership of Congress to the White House tomorrow for a public event. The rest of the president's scheduled tomorrow and for the rest of the week on hold, as the president obviously will be on hand at the White House to meet again with his national security team and assess anything he needs to do, both to respond to what has happened here in the United States, and we know there are troop deployments and other security precautions being taken overseas as well. Gene?
John, any word about the prospect of retaliatory strikes?
You obviously heard the president in his remarks saying if and when there are retaliatory strikes, they would not just be limited to the suspected terrorists, but also to anyone who harbors them. That taken, of course, as a signal to some that even the president was leaning a bit forward with the bin Laden connection. But I spoke to a senior official immediately after that session tonight who said, don't expect anything on an imminent basis. This official said, we're going to get this right. We're going to take a little time, he said, to sort this out. Gene?
John, will life be different tomorrow for the president and also for average Americans in terms of security precautions?
Life will be different for the president and the entire country. We have seen around the grounds of the White House behind me, it is dark in the complex now, but extraordinary security circumstances throughout the day. Indeed, as the president flew back to Washington today, if you looked out the window of Air Force One, you could see military fighter jets in very close proximity to Air Force One, and the president was brought back hours later than they had hoped. At one point, they wanted to bring the president directly back from Florida. Then he made a stop in Louisiana for a military base. They decided not to bring him back immediately because at that time, we are told, not all of the aircraft in the skies over the United States had been accounted for. The White House was not willing to bring the president back into Washington until all those aircraft had been accounted for and until other security steps were taken. Now, as for average Americans, we are told the plan is to reopen the nation's air traffic control system and therefore the nation's domestic air travel at noon tomorrow, barring any new troubling information overnight. Any American, though, going to an airport or a major train station in the days ahead, we are told, will see extraordinarily new, stringent security measures. Gene?
Senior White House correspondent John King, thank you. And now back to Jim Clancy in Atlanta.
All right, Gene, thank you for that. Well, earlier we heard what it was like for a professional cameraman on the scene at the World Trade Center this day, but what was it like to really witness the attack as an amateur, as someone who was there for another reason entirely? That's what happened with Dr. Mark Heath this day. He went to the scene to see if he could help the victims of the first attack, and he wound up being caught in the second.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Oxygen. Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks. They told me just to wait here at this semi-staging area. See if I can help, and that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on. So far, I've just seen some people who needed oxygen from the dust. No one trauma. Gonna go wash my eyes out. Yeah, that almost made it worse. Looking north on the West Side Highway. You guys going in? Yeah. Come with you. You know, you might not want to get too much closer because the more buildings could come down, then we're not going to help anybody.
All right.
I think we should. Yeah.
Where's the incident come out?
Let's just. Yeah. Okay. Let's just wait right here. Let's just station up right here. Okay.
All right, Doc.
Why don't we set up? Can you hang IVs from this pole here?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just heard another explosion. They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there. Just going to wait here until they bring some people out. I was hooked up with some firemen with some first aid stuff. You know what? Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay? Any suggestions? Should we set up here for medical work? Think this is safe enough?
And there we have it. One man's journey, an incredible journey through a day of disaster. That was amateur video from Dr. Mark Heath. Colleen?
All right, Jim. Well, disaster relief agencies say they're rushing blood supplies to New York City and to Washington as well. People have been jamming donation centers to help the untold number of victims of these attacks. The American Red Cross says it has 60,000 units of blood in several East Coast cities that it can ship to hospitals in New York City and Washington. Even people on the other side of the country in Los Angeles have been lining up at blood donation centers. Authorities say they will continue to need donations, though, over the next 2 weeks, even longer, we're hearing now, perhaps even a couple of months to replenish their supplies. Officials say the most needed blood types, O positive, O negative. They are the universal blood types that can be transfused into anyone in an emergency. Now, at hospitals throughout the New York area, medical heroics are going on. Michael Oku is standing by at St. Vincent's Hospital and Medical Center, which is one of the trauma centers closest to the World Trade Center. Michael, go ahead.
Colleen, they call this a city that never sleeps, and I'm sure that tonight in New York, no one is doing that. And yet, despite that, there's a very eerie silence that's broken across the city tonight, as you can well imagine, only occasionally broken by the sound of emergency medical vehicles. I'm standing in Lower Manhattan, just south of 14th Street, and if you can look just north of me, you can see that police have set up barricades so that no one can come below this part of New York City. And it limits traffic to this part of New York City to just the occasional emergency medical vehicle and to police vehicles. I'm standing just about 2 blocks west of St. Vincent's Hospital, which has been set up as the main trauma and triage center here in New York. As of 10:30 last night, which was the time of the last hospital press conference, officials at St. Vincent's Hospital said that there were 327 patients who had been admitted. 50 to 55 of them were in critical condition, and they also reported, of course, that there were 3 deaths. Most of the victims, they say, had suffered from severe burns. Most of those burns had been burns that were sustained in the face, and there were occasional cases in which patients suffered from cardiac arrest, some from existing conditions which were, of course, triggered by this trauma. Now, Governor Pataki was here earlier at St. Vincent's, and he reported that he met with victims as well as some of the doctors who worked on some of the patients here. He said that every story seemed to be an unusual one, and you can imagine there are no usual stories tonight. For the most part, the scene outside the hospital looks like this. Dozens of men and women in scrubs, under portable lights, waiting. Basically gurneys that have been set up, wheelchairs, office furniture covered in sheets as they await more victims, more people whose lives they are hoping to save. That's what the scene looks like outside St. Vincent's Hospital tonight, and what I have to report is probably one of the most eerie nights that I've spent in the city. The hospital says that they will have another briefing later this morning at 6:30. Back to you.
All right, Michael Oku, thanks very much. Jim?
As America came under attack, so too did its financial sector. Wall Street virtually shut down this day because of the attacks in New York City, as well as across the country when all airlines were shut down. President Bush going on television to reassure not only Americans, but others who have an interest, who share in the globalization that has taken place within the financial world, and markets are reacting to the events in the United States yesterday. Let's go to